into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
they being the defense was kind of like, okay, well, the government didn't offer any response to this particular hotel receipt. But then the judge was kind of like, well, Nicole Westmoreland really did have her Perry Mason moment under the cross-examination, and that's not grounds for a mistrial because they were kind of able to really kind of poke holes into the story that Bonner was testifying to, as opposed to that Trump hotel receipt, which showed that Diddy wasn't even on the West Coast when this alleged incident particularly happened. And then the defense was like, well, Cassie said that she saw this incident happen, but then in the text message she's saying that she saw or she heard about this incident because she was told about this incident after the fact. And so the defense says that they wanted to submit a certain instruction to the jury so that way the jurors know that Bonner's testimony was allegedly perjured. But the government was like, well, Bonner's testimony wasn't perjured. She might have been confused. The metadata could have been wrong because when they were still showing exhibits at this point, you could see the metadata of when Bonner took or was sent photos of her injuries after this alleged incident happened. Those injuries were taken or at least sent to her on September 26th. But on that same day, Diddy was, there's a hotel receipt showing that Diddy was actually here in New York, not in California around this time. But the judge said, well, maybe there's this innocent explanation that this happened 9 years ago. Bonner testified that she was in her early 20s at this point, addicted to drugs, and that this photo could have been taken earlier, it could have been taken later, and that the defense did enough on the cross-examination to the timing of when this alleged incident happened. But the defense was like, well, the government still isn't bringing up this hotel receipt, and Bonner had motivation to lie while on the witness stand because of her civil suit against Sean Combs. And then the judge was like, okay, well, you can submit a proposed instruction for the jury to listen to. And then the defense was like, okay. But as far as the motion to recall Dr. Don Hughes to testify, that motion was denied. And so it was interesting because during the cross-examination of Dr. Don Hughes, who was a government witness, she was kind of a blind witness to this case, Jonathan Bach, who was retained kind of last minute for Diddy's defense team, that was the only time we actually saw him inside the court doing the cross-examination when Dr. Don Hughes testified. But we did see him today, and I think we might have seen him today, especially this morning, just in the case that the judge didn't deny this motion, and so that Jonathan Bach could possibly argue it, but we didn't see him after the lunch break. But essentially the judge was like, okay, well, Dr. Hughes testified about romantic relationships, not employee relationships when it comes to Mia, and specifically Mia still sending text messages to Diddy even after she was kind of terminated from her employment, but also after the allegations that she said that she had against Diddy, where she was saying that Diddy allegedly sexually assaulted and sexually abused her. And so the judge was kind of like, okay, well, that was the government's job to really ask those questions as far as the employee relationships and why people may text their employer after the fact. And so it seemed like the judge gave a win to both sides this morning, either the motion for the mistrial or even the motion to recall Dr. Don Hughes. And so that was kind of what it all happened this morning before the jury entered and before the witness came back on the stand.
That's so specific, right? So you can't just make, I guess the judge is saying, you can't just make a general analysis that any victim-abuser relationship, there has to be, if it, she testified about a romantic relationship and the dynamics of a romantic relationship as opposed to anybody else who might be abused. Yeah, it sounds like the prosecution should have thought of that, and that could be a problem. That could be a problem. Although you also wonder, the jury might just listen to Dr. Don Hughes and use that analysis to explain away some of the behavior of any of the witnesses who've testified. I don't know. Don't want to get down that hole. I do want to talk about Jane. And it seemed the beginning of her cross-examination by Tenny Geragos was about the circumstances that brought her to even be a witness in this trial, right?
Well, right off the bat, Tenny Geragos, very friendly, I felt like, with Jane while she was on the witness stand. You would think that the two were kind of old friends catching up. Obviously, we know that's not the case, but Tenny came out very nice. She wasn't kind of like aggressive necessarily. It wasn't kind of like the Brian Steele moment of the cross-examination of Mia, or even the Nicole Westmoreland cross-examination of Bonner, or even Don Richard. But right off the bat, the defense was acknowledging or that they had met with Jane specifically just a few times before she later became a government witness, and that they were really kind of putting an emphasis that even though Diddy is currently paying her rent and Diddy is currently paying for the lawyer that she has representing her, that Diddy didn't even interfere, even though he's paying for her attorney. And that Jane was explaining once again to the jurors that she hasn't spoken to Diddy for 8 months prior to taking the stand or even seen him, because obviously he's been incarcerated since the last time she saw him. But last time she saw him in person was August of 2024. He was arrested the following month, and she says she hasn't seen him since August of last year. And so the defense was asking Jane about her preparation for the cross-examination, and that happened over 2 or so meetings with the government. Jane said that she wasn't the one who went to Homeland Security, that it was the federal prosecutors who had called her, and that she didn't want anything to do with HSI. We learned yesterday while she was on the witness stand, still under direct, that HSI on the day of the raids to Diddy's Miami property as well as his Los Angeles home, that HSI actually left a card on Jane's door too. And so then the defense is kind of like, okay, well, you had done a night with an escort even after knowing that he was under investigation. And Jane says yes, and that Jane was given immunity to be a grand jury or given immunity at the grand jury hearing. And then the defense is like, okay, well, you chose to participate. And Jane is like, well, it was because of my relationship with him and the lifestyle that he introduced me to. Well, you didn't break up with him. This is Tenny Garagos. And then Jane is like, well, of course not. And that they were really kind of talking about whether or not Jane has regret versus resentment versus regret. And that Jane was explaining that she didn't have regret, just a little bit resentment. And so I think for the jurors kind of listening to this, because I even said this yesterday, Jesse, you can feel sometimes while she's testifying that she still has feelings for Sean Combs. But then I think there are also other aspects where she's still kind of processing, and this is something that she testified to, just processing everything that went on throughout the duration of their relationship.
Elizabeth, would I be crazy to say that what I think the defense is doing is not necessarily, and we'll get into this, not necessarily attack.
So, sippers, thank you for sipping tea with Tanisha on this Monday. It's afternoon. We've been on live since this morning. We are going all the way into the afternoon. Who knows how long it's going to take today to wrap up the Diddy review from the 20th through to the 24th. Would it be safe to say that most ex-traffic people don't love their ex-traffickers? What do y'all know about it? Drop it down in the chat along with those teacups. Thanks for sipping tea with Tanisha Talks Teas. Remember, when you come in the room too, lift your teacup up to get filled up with all these Diddy teas. Also, like and subscribe.
Attacking her credibility, that these things happen the same way they were attacking the credibility of, let's say, a Mia or a Brianna Bengolan, trying to say you were never sexually assaulted, or you were never dangled off the balcony. But it seems what they're trying to say, and I could be wrong, you're testifying to something, and it's the government who's forcing you to testify. It's the government who's transforming your testimony about what could be a toxic relationship into this racketeering case, into this sex trafficking case. It's not like they're distancing themselves from these episodes occurring. It's not as if they're saying these episodes with other men didn't happen. But to me, it seems what they're saying, they're not even attacking her so much as trying to say, you didn't want to be a part of this. It's the government who's forcing you here. It's the government who's transforming your testimony into this federal charge when it's not. Real quick, do you think I'm totally off with that based on the questioning today? And we'll get more specific about it.
Yeah, not at all. I felt that way kind of at times too.
How do you, up until Diddy gets arrested for the alleged crimes that he's being charged with, want Diddy to go to the feds? Unless you're planted person, you know what they call people that they plant in people's situation. I believe that's what this is. I think this was just Diddy, trying to get back at 50 for all the shit that 50 been throwing at him, and Diddy saw a way to get at 50 through his baby mama, and that's what he did. I don't think the feds sent her in on Diddy. Who knows though, but we'll see.
where it was kind of like, okay, do you feel like that, honestly, count 4 really applies to you, or is the government telling you that count 4 really applies to you? Because there were times, Jesse, to be quite honest with you, that I was like, okay, well, it seems that she was totally fine doing these hotel nights, as long as she was also getting the love and adoration and affection from her partner, from her lover, from Sean Combs, pretty much. And so I wonder, when the jury goes back to eventually deliberate on this case, will they kind of have the same feelings that I think a lot of us were having, where they were kind of like, okay, do you feel that you are a sex trafficking victim, or is this something the government is telling that you are? And so it could go kind of either way. We'll see.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I understand, the Cross really focused on, and not surprising here, a lot about the love in the relationship and how she wanted to cuddle next to him and she wanted to be with him and, essentially do all these things. And even voice notes were played to show the loving relationship, right? Talk to us about that, because it might be difficult for a jury to reconcile that he is a sex trafficker and she's a victim based on our common understanding or general understanding of what those roles might be, versus the love in this relationship, right? Didn't they focus upon that at the beginning of her cross, the love and the voice notes? What happened there?
Yeah, well, Jane was explaining that there was a lot of kind of blurred lines in terms of her emotions, and that she just wanted to fulfill her duties as a partner to Sean Combs. And so the defense was really kind of talking, to your point, Jesse, just about the love that Jane had for Sean Combs, aka Diddy, and just why she kept staying throughout the 3 or so years of their relationship. And that she kept on even doing these hotel nights, especially even during the later years where she was kind of expressing that she didn't want to be doing them anymore, and this was all that she was worth. But as far as even that, when they were recalling that Jane would, put on Diddy's favorite show, which so happens to be Dateline. Unfortunately, I was waiting to hear that it might have been Sidebar presented by Jesse Weber, but unfortunately it was Dateline. And that Diddy was smiling as Jane was talking about doing foot rubs on him. And I thought it was an interesting kind of moment where he just kind of, took the mask off a little bit and was smiling just about that particular part of the testimony. But then, we started kind of getting into the exhibits as far as the voice notes goes, because this is a very, was a very current relationship. So there was a lot of text shown and there was a lot of voice notes shown, because that's what a lot of people do nowadays, as opposed to texting or calling. They send voice notes to one another. And so they kind of took us back a little bit to their Turks and Caicos trip when they two first kind of got together. And so we heard an exhibit, and it's a voice note from Diddy to Jane, where Diddy is saying, "Hey, baby, we had a great time. You are the crack pipe." And the crack pipe was kind of in reference to, I guess, their lovemaking, essentially. And that Diddy was saying, okay, stay in the light. It was so much effing fun. Get in your bag. And the get in your bag comment, according to Jane, was kind of acknowledging that love contract where they had like a gentleman's agreement for him to pretty much pay for her rent. And so then we hear a voice note from Jane to Diddy where she's like, "I love being up under you. Stay in the light. We'll have a big celebration for you. A whole new level was unlocked. I've been closer to you. I'm so happy. I hope you have an amazing day today. Health is wealth. I love you so, so, so much. Moi. Yay to your contract." And that contract that she was referring to was the love contract. And so it seemed like we were kind of hearing a lot of other voice notes where Jane was kind of expressing her love to Diddy, and Diddy was kind of expressing his love back to her, as opposed to yesterday under the direct, where really the prosecution was kind of showing the more kind of aggressive voice notes where Diddy was telling her to get out of her feelings and that he's single, all of that stuff. But as far as today goes, the defense really kind of was like, okay, well, there was love there. Yeah. You two were expressing love with one another, and you seemed comfortable expressing your love with your partner at the time.
By the way, we plan to continue to providing you this Diddy coverage. We're going to give you recaps. We're going to break down these legal issues that happen almost every day in court. And one of the reasons we can do this and bring you this content is because we get amazing support from our incredible partner and sponsor. Is a willing participant, that he isn't this nefarious sex trafficker as portrayed by the prosecution, that there was no force, fraud, or coercion. So I want to bring on Law and Crimes in-court reporter Elizabeth Milner, who's been not only in the courtroom today for all of the action, but in the courtroom for every minute of the action, every day. And particularly today with the cross-examination of Jane, it's really interesting. Elizabeth, before we even get into that, there was a lot of chatter, particularly on the lunchtime show that we do on Law and Crimes YouTube, and commentary about this juror there's apparently some sort of issue with a juror. I know we have limited information, but based on what was said in court, can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so they gave us little tidbits, little pieces of information, little nuggets here and there, but it seems like from the defense's perspective that they really want to keep this particular juror and they want to make sure that this juror will not be dismissed. Now, as far as why this juror might possibly be dismissed, that is still kind of up in the air. As far as what we've even seen in the transcripts, that portion is redacted or it's sealed. And so the defense was just pretty much saying that they want to be able to respond to what the government responded to in another letter. And so they said pretty much that they being the government, and this is the defense making this argument, that the government just wants to strike another black juror. And then I think the government kind of took a little bit of offense to that. And the government was like, well, okay, looking back at the record, we see kind of a lack of compelling, and then they were kind of going so fast. But as far as just what the judge said, as far as what will happen kind of next, is that we'll deal with this issue before the weekend. And so it's still kind of up in the air as far as even all the jurors being inside the courtroom today, because it was a little bit of a shorter session today. Everyone was in there. I saw all the jurors. So nobody has been dismissed thus far. Nobody's been kicked out just yet or anything like that. But we should know before the week is over what will happen to this juror number 6.
Yeah, I saw reporting that the prosecution says there's a lack of candor, meaning, I don't know, the juror wasn't being honest with something during jury selection. I'm not sure. Hopefully we get more information as the week progresses. But let's now get into Jane's testimony. So it seems to me, and there's a lot to get into here, it seems to me a big theme today was trying to stress that she wasn't objecting to the hotel nights, or that she was somehow setting them up or encouraging them, and also how she communicated with the men, how she communicated with the sex workers. What can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so it was another day, and again, even though it was a shortened day, it was another day where we were seeing a lot, or not we were seeing a lot of text exhibits, because while Jane is still on the stand, unfortunately, we cannot see the exhibits. They are not shown on the exhibit screen, but we're hearing about all these different exhibits. So sometimes when I say we're seeing, the jury's actually seeing it, but we are hearing about all these different text messages. And so, yes, it seemed like the theme from the defense's cross-examination of Jane today was definitely like, it seemed from their kind of theory of this that Jane was a willing participant, even went as far as to set up these hotel nights, and even went as far as to book these entertainers that she specifically wanted for these various hotel nights. And so just right off the bat, we're seeing text exhibits between Jane and Cabral, one of the entertainers or escorts that they use, from December 20th of 2021. So still kind of early-ish into the relationship between Sean Combs and Jane. And so these text messages were after a hotel night where Cabral is saying, "Good morning, love. How are you feeling? We had a pretty intense night. That was the roughest sex we ever had." And then Jane is responding, "Ha, ha, 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 ha," bunch of emojis. That was one for the books. And then Jane also responded, "Send me something." And then the defense was kind of getting into the length of these hotel nights, where one of the longest hotel nights that she had done was 3 days, which is a long period of time. And then under direct, when AUSA Maureen Comey was doing her direct examination of Jane, Jane was explaining that New Year's Eve of 2022, that Diddy came to Jane's hotel and that 3 men were there that night, and that she seemed okay with doing these types of nights. But as far as Jane's kind of role in setting up these hotel nights, the jury did see other text exhibits between Jane and Cabral, where Cabral is saying, "Hey, I'll be in LA on the 12th of February. And Jane is saying, "Hey, babe, happy Friday. Are you up? How are you? It's my birthday weekend and you didn't show me love. I haven't forgotten that your LA dates are coming up. Make me a personal video just for me." And then Cabral responds to these text messages. And so then the jury also saw more text exhibits, kind of going fast forward a little bit in time, April 4th of 2022, between Jane and Sean Combs, where Diddy is saying, "I've been having crazy fantasies about you and Leo being the Italian person that Jane references. He's actually one of the entertainers, but she calls him the Italian." And then Jane is saying, "I'll figure out what time I can make it out there. Baby, I want to make love to you. I haven't had you to myself. It's been 5 months. I'm fine with the other stuff." And Diddy is saying that he's aroused. "What have you been thinking about? See if the Italian is free after we spend time together. Tomorrow is bad. How about this weekend?" And it seemed like Jane, even for the next hotel night, which occurred 10 days later after these text messages that I just read, but the defense was kind of pointing out that after these specific hotel nights in April of 2022, that Jane and Diddy didn't have hotel nights for about 2 months, whereas under direct, it seemed like Jane's was testifying that pretty much every time she saw Diddy, that she was doing these hotel nights, but the defense was really kind of saying, well, there were long periods of times where you weren't doing these hotel nights. It could either be weeks on end, it could be months on end, or there were just times where you and Diddy were just hanging out together and being together and in each other's arms, but you guys weren't always doing these hotel nights. And so then more text exhibits were shown to the jury, this being in June 19th of 2022, where Jane is saying, I'm having a vibe. Diddy says, well, what are you in the mood for? And Jane is saying, a good time. And then Diddy saying, you planned something for me. Jane said, I know what you want, but I'm not in the mood. I don't want to make you mad. And then Diddy responds, all good. Surprise me with a freak off role play. And so I think the defense also pointing out here that they didn't do a hotel night, even though it was kind of insinuated in these particular messages. But what they ended up doing was having a movie night. And that was a night where they weren't watching movies, you know, a good movie from a movie theater or anything like that. But they were watching movies that would either be pornography or movies that they filmed together during these hotel nights. And so the defense really kind of, I think, poked a lot of holes as far as Jane saying under direct that every time she always did these hotel nights, every single time she saw Sean Combs or saw Diddy. But under the defense's cross-examination, they were really like, okay, it doesn't seem like that was always the case.
Yeah, and the idea, right, that he didn't always force or demand her to engage in this, but she was a partner in it. And I remember there was a message today, and correct me if I'm wrong, where she had messaged him, not really in the mood for that part, don't want to make you mad. And he allegedly responds, all good. And then there's messages where she expresses her love for him. Like, I love you so much as my friend, my lover, my boyfriend, even though you don't like that word. Weren't they really trying to show today, through her messages and his messages, that he wasn't always forcing her or asking her opinion about this and trying to show the love that they had between each other, right? That was a big theme, the softer side of Sean Combs, right?
Yeah, the very soft side from what we see. Like, there are times, honestly, Jesse, where the messages are being read aloud, and it seems like they're sometimes, and I kind of hate to put it this way, like they're two high school kids in love. Like, you really, at times, I felt kind of conflicted as far as just hearing these, because there's, you know, the aspects of Jane's testimony under direct, right? But then there's aspects of the cross examination where the defense was kind of like, okay, the government didn't show you every single thing between their relationship, and there were just kind of a lot of things. And so Jane, throughout her testimony, even under direct, even under cross-examination, she really kind of expresses very often how much she loves pleasing her partner, her romantic partner, her lover, and that being Sean Combs around the time. And so we're hearing more text exhibits, July 22nd of 2022, where Jane is saying, good morning, baby, I had such a great time with you. Diddy saying, want to do dinner at 9, pack a freak bag just in case. But then the defense pointed out to Jane, okay, well, just because he made you pack a freak bag doesn't mean you guys always did hotel nights, right? And Jane was like, yeah, that is true, and that she would normally just pack these freak night bags or these freak bags, and she would put lingerie and high heels and just things that he likes inside these particular bags. And so then we're hearing more text exhibits around that same time frame, summer of 2022. So this was July 27th of 2022, where Diddy's saying, what do you want to do? And Jane is saying, well, what do you want to do, baby? And then just that, are you aroused for me? And Diddy's like, okay, well, I'm going to work out with Paul and then meet up with you. And then Jane is saying, do you want my hair up? And Diddy's saying, okay, what time are we ready? So as far as the really lovey-dovey messages, those were also shown a lot today, where there was an exhibit shown to the jury where it was text messages from Jane to Diddy after a hotel night, where, and it was kind of interesting, Jesse, because these are really kind of lovey-dovey messages that are being read out loud to the jury. However, at this particular part, Jane is getting kind of emotional on the stand. And I kind of even wrote in my notes, I wasn't sure why, because as you're hearing these particular messages being read, it's things like, I love you so much, baby. You're the reason my child smiles. I love you. No other man has treated me this way. Then there's more messages from Jane again, and the defense is pointing out these were after hotel nights where Jane is saying, I love you, baby. Can't wait to see your interview tomorrow. And that Diddy just makes her smile. And Jane wrote, just wanted to make you smile, spending time in the sunshine. Diddy is writing in messages, okay, movie night was off the chain, and Jane is responding, loving that, delicious, and just more messages where you could really see just the love between the two. There was one particular video that was actually shown to the jury. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see it, but you could really hear Diddy and Jane kind of in a moment of togetherness, not like that way, but togetherness as far as being together just as two people would in just any other relationship. And so this was a video again shown to the jury where Jane was explaining around this particular time frame. She was feeling depressed around this, but then you see this video and Diddy is saying, oh, I love this right here. They sounded so in love. Jane is heard laughing a lot in this particular video, and Diddy is saying, I was in a dark hole. You had to save me. You had to pick me up. I love you. And then Jane is saying, I love you too, baby. You did saving on me. And so the defense was saying that around this time frame where Jane is saying that she was really depressed around this time because she was doing all these hotel nights, not with just one man, but with multiple men, and that she was super depressed, that she and Diddy were spending time together, that they were both depressed together. But in this video, you can hear just really just kind of love and laughter. But according to Jane, because again, she was getting kind of emotional at points, especially during the latter part of court today, where I was kind of wondering why particularly she was getting a little emotional, as it just seemed pretty innocent, pretty innocent just hearing these texts.
Let me ask you this. It seemed to me based on reading the reporting, she was doubling down on the stand, and correct me if I'm wrong, doubling down on the stand that she was pressured into this, that it might look like she was all on board with this, but that she felt pressured to do this. And I don't know what that back and forth looked like between her and Tenny Geragos, but would I be wrong that is a common theme, a common response she came back with today?
Yeah, it seemed like she really was kind of doubling down as far as why she was doing these hotel nights, because she wanted to please her partner, but also that she, and that same breath kind of was saying that she was just very uncomfortable with it. But I think the defense was also kind of like, okay, are you saying that you're uncomfortable with these hotel nights because you have regret or resentment now? But it seemed like from these messages, and it seemed like from what we were hearing about in these exhibits, that around the time frame where this was occurring, so between 2021 to 2024, and we haven't even really got into 2024 just yet, that Jane was totally fine, and that the only things that would make her apprehensive about these hotel nights, according to the defense, was that Diddy and other women were being seen together publicly. So they brought up other women, including a name that we've heard a lot during testimony, going all the way back to Cassie, that being Gina, another example being Young Miami. And then it wasn't even just those two, it was other women too, where Jane would spot photos of him with a woman in London and would get upset, and the defense is kind of like, okay, well, is this why you were saying that you didn't want to do a hotel night? Is this why that you were saying you were uncomfortable, as opposed to a couple weeks or months ago where you were planning to do these nights, the sobriety party or the all-star party and those types of things? And so it seemed like a little back and forth where I think Jane at points was kind of getting a little short with her answers, as far as just being like trying to over-explain her text messages and why she particularly sent those types of text messages, because it was either to please her partner or because she was reading in between the lines of what Diddy really wanted. Right. And then she would get a little short with Tenny Geragos at some points today, but she held it together as best as she could. But again, going back to some of those points where she was a little emotional on the stand too. So it was a little bit of both today.
A mysterious unnamed rapper, alleged coerced sex acts, a major blow-up. Key Diddy accuser Jane has wrapped up her testimony and faced a lot of questions from the rap mogul's attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Another significant day in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial. The defense wrapped up their questioning, their cross-examination of accuser Jane. She's officially off the stand. She was questioned once again by the prosecution. We'll get into that too. But this is Sean Combs' former love interest, who claims that essentially she was pressured into sex acts with other men as Combs watched and pleasured himself. Hotel nights, debauchery nights. Claims that Combs was physically violent with her. Claims that he forced her to engage in these sex sessions when she was sick, exhausted, that she was taking drugs, that these were prolonged for hours on end. But as we've been talking about all week, since she's been facing cross-examination from the defense, there have been openings for Sean Combs' defense team to exploit. And it seems that is certainly what they have been doing, about whether or not she was a willing participant. Did she set up these events? Did she encourage them? Did she arrange the travel and pay for these male performers? Was she fueled by jealousy in her relationship with Sean Combs as opposed to being a victim of sex trafficking? These are the important questions that the jury's going to have to wrestle with. So let's talk about what happened today. Let's talk about the culmination of her cross-examination, what the prosecution did when they got a chance to question her as well. And also there was something going on about this mysterious unnamed rapper. Let's talk about it. Let me bring in Law and Crime's in-court reporter Elizabeth Milner, who's been inside that courtroom for every day of the testimony. Elizabeth, it's good to see you. Before we even talk about Jane, though, and well, before we even get into the cross-examination, my understanding is there was a bit of a back and forth about whether or not the judge was going to let in some pieces of evidence. I think one was an audio recording from Sean Combs, and one was some sort of personal note or maybe even a diary entry or journal entry from Jane. What's going on there?
Yeah, so these were conversations that took place outside of the jury. So before Jane got back on the witness stand today, as well as the jury even coming in for the start of the day, because we did have a pretty delayed start this morning. But as far as just some of the evidentiary issues that both parties were discussing this morning, the defense wanted to introduce a particular audio message that Diddy had recorded around December 20th of 2023. And so the defense was arguing in Jane's direct testimony that she said she told Diddy she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights going back all the way to 2021. And so they were saying that this particular audio message would go to Diddy's state of mind. And so again, this audio message from December 20th of 2023, where Diddy was saying something along the lines to Jane that he was unaware and never understood how she really felt about doing these hotel nights. And again, just putting this into context, the two started dating in 2021, and Diddy is saying in 2023 that he had no idea that she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights. And they were saying that they being the defense, that the government opened the door to let this piece of audio message in, but the government was kind of like, well, this time period elicited under direct was about 2024, and that was the end of their relationship. And they were saying that it's a 403 issue and that Diddy was possibly trying to feed a false narrative around this time frame, because again, context is a little bit of everything in this case, because December 20th of 2023 was a month after Cassie had filed her federal lawsuit and also settled within that next day. And so the government was kind of like, we don't know if this statement is actually truthful, and we don't know if, again, that Sean Combs was trying to feed this particular narrative to Jane, because again, Jane was expressing that she kind of felt the same way as Cassie did in certain pages of her lawsuit, and Diddy's now saying, okay, I didn't know that you felt this way. And so the government was saying that this is an attempt to get in his own statement as hearsay. Now, they said if the defendant wants to go up there himself and talk about this as a witness, as he would testify when the defense takes over and starts to do their case, the government said, hey, that's fine, you can totally do that. But as far as this particular audio message, the judge ruled in favor of the government, so the objection was sustained. Now, as far as the other exhibit and the other evidentiary issue, it had to do a lot with Jane and her kind of notes that she was making to herself within her notes app on her phone, kind of similar to diary entries. And so the government wanted to use this particular diary entry from around the time after Cassie had filed her lawsuit, and this was a diary/note entry from Jane herself. And so they wanted to use this particular note under redirect, so they didn't use it under direct, so they were trying to get it in under redirect, because again, around this time frame, the defense was still doing the cross-examination. And so the government was saying kind of the opposite of what the defense was saying in the last argument, that the government said the defense opened the door. And the note itself, now we didn't see it, because obviously the exhibits are still, they were kept closed from us in the public, us in the press, because Jane was still testifying. But what we did learn is that this note was also around that same time frame, December of 2023, where Jane was saying something along the lines of she felt manipulated, she felt obligated to be doing these hotel nights about 98% of the time. And the government said that this particular note that she had wrote to herself and might have also sent to Diddy that it rebuts her cross-examination, but the defense was like, well, there's no probative value and it's unnecessary, and the government says they just really wanted to get in that one particular statement. They said it's under Rule 803, and Jesse, you can talk more about that. I obviously don't know what Rule 803 is, but that the government was saying that she didn't do this because she was scared of criminal prosecution, that she was doing this because this really kind of went to her state of mind of around that time. Now, initially, the judge did reserve his ruling on that particular sentence, but they picked that up. I think it was post the lunch break, and the defense was saying that Jane kind of did have a financial motive, and again, context is everything, where they were saying this note was coming in after December of 2023, so a month after Cassie had filed her lawsuit. So they were saying, okay, well, maybe it's possible that Jane had a financial motive because she had asked for $100,000 from Diddy for everything that she had endured throughout their 3-year relationship. And she didn't ask for it in a civil suit. She didn't ask it through a lawyer. She sent this through a particular text message. And so what ended up happening is the judge denied the government's application to admit this particular statement. So unfortunately, the jury was not able to see this statement whenever Jane got back on the stand and whenever the government did redirect her testimony towards the end of the day today.
Yeah. Rule 803 is an exception to hearsay, and there's a number of different exceptions. Hearsay, out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Here's the thing. When I hear the idea of him having a recording that allegedly would be used to feed a narrative, I go back to what Mia testified to, that after Cassie's lawsuit, she gets contacted allegedly by D-Rock, Sean Combs' former bodyguard, basically trying to say, hey, yeah, everything between Cassie and Sean, that was normal. That was normal, like trying to make sure she gets on the same page, and that he was trying to make sure Sean Combs could reach out to her, that he wanted to give her a gift, bribery, obstruction, tampering with witnesses. That is all the narrative being put forward by the prosecution, and it also makes one of the elements or potential elements of racketeering, this criminal enterprise charge. And let me go now into the cross-examination of Jane. There has been a lot of talk today, particularly when I was covering the Lunchtime Show on Law and Crime's YouTube page, about this mysterious rapper. Something happened, this encounter happened in 2024, Las Vegas. There's an unnamed rapper, either the rapper's wife or girlfriend, and apparently one of the alleged sex workers that Jane and Sean Combs had used in their private sessions was brought up. What was this all about?
So if you've been following Jane's testimony, I know you have, Jesse, but to our viewers, if you've been following Jane's testimony, she had mentioned this particular trip to Vegas that happened in January of 2024. So again, context is everything. This was a time that Diddy and Jane were in an off period from their relationship. They had taken a break, but Jane had gone to Vegas with this unnamed rapper because they were pretty adamant today not to say this rapper's name in court. And there's kind of a reason why, and I'll get to it in just a second, but it's interesting because Jane around this time was telling Diddy that she loved and missed him, but the two weren't speaking during this particular month at the same time. But Jane ended up going to Vegas with this unnamed rapper, flew on his private jet, but also with his girlfriend/wife, unclear on who that is. But what we did learn today is that Diddy is particularly close and friendship with this particular rapper, and that the defense referred to this, again, unnamed rapper as an icon. And so reading in between the lines, you can kind of see possibly who it might be. But Jane said that she was surprised to see Anton, the entertainer/escort, there at this particular Vegas trip, because if you remember under her testimony, she had said that Anton was there and he was having sex with a woman on a bed, and a bunch of people were kind of watching all of this, and this again being in Vegas. And Anton also knew this unnamed rapper who had this connection or friendship with Diddy, and Anton also knew this unnamed rapper's girlfriend/wife, because the defense kind of said it's his girlfriend, it's his wife, so we don't know what their state of the relationship is. But Jane was explaining that 7 or 8 people were in this room kind of watching Anton have sex with this woman, and that Jane admitted that she flirted with this particular unnamed rapper, and that Jane had previously told the government in previous interviews that she flashed her breasts during this encounter, this flirtation that was going on in this hotel room, and that she began dancing during this, and that the rapper told Jane that she was beautiful and that he wanted to F her. And so I think what the defense was trying to do when pointing out this particular January 2024 Vegas trip was kind of trying to say that Jane would also reach out to the entertainers or the escorts outside of her relationship with Diddy, because in this particular case, she was recommending an entertainer that she and Diddy used to this unnamed rapper and to his girlfriend slash wife, because they were the unnamed rapper and his girlfriend slash wife were part of the lifestyle. And so Jane was kind of recommending Cabral to them. And so the jury was able to see text exhibits. And initially Jane was saying things along the lines of Merry Christmas, hope you had a beautiful holiday. And then Cabral texted a few days later saying, good afternoon, beautiful, I'll be in your city on the 7th. And Jane was responding, hey Cabral, good morning, what time is your flight today? Those types of things. And so at the end, what we did learn, because I know there's been a lot of talk about who this unnamed rapper is, they didn't say who this person was during testimony today, but it seemed like the defense's whole point of even bringing up this particular trip is one that Diddy was upset that other people knew that Jane and him were kind of engaged in this lifestyle based off the fact that Jane had recommended Cabral, an entertainer that the two have used in hotel nights, to this unnamed rapper.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I wonder the jury might take away. One, like you said, if she is having this communication, this relationship with one of the sex workers who's being used essentially, right, in this crime, if the jury's accepting this as sex trafficking in this crime, kind of muddies the waters on that, makes it a little bit more gray. Is she really a victim of sex trafficking? I also think, her allegedly flashing her breasts, it kind of goes a little bit to her lifestyle and her character, but also I think it seems to me, if the allegation is you have this unnamed rapper who's interested in bringing someone into their relationship, it's maybe normalizing this behavior. Maybe it's not necessarily, a sex trafficking criminal enterprise as the prosecution is trying to allege. Maybe that's where they're going. I do understand, whether it was because of this or something else. What was a big event that happened that was talked about in trial today was this blow up, this fight that happened between Sean Combs and Jane that was quite violent, right? And it wasn't just violence, at least the way that was described, from Combs directed to Jane. It was vice versa too, right? This was a fight. What happened here?
Yeah, so this was a fight that took place in June of 2024. So around this time frame, just last year. Afterwards, or before this incident had occurred, Diddy and his family went on a road trip, and then after coming back from this road trip, that Diddy went over to Jane's house on this specific date of June 18th. And if you've been following Jane's testimony very closely, she alleged under direct that she was beaten and then made to do a hotel night or give oral sex to an entertainer even after being beaten by Diddy. But under the cross-examination, they really kind of peeled back just a little bit more as far as just kind of how everything led up to what it ended up happening. And so the jury was able to see exhibits, and that was being the decorations laid out inside of Jane's home where Diddy pays the rent for, but that Jane had set up just kind of candles and champagne and tequila shots, and then Jonathan, Diddy's assistant, came over and set up kind of the red lights in the room. And so the red lights turned on once it got dark, so the jury was able to see these particular photos, because again, remember, we can't see the exhibits while Jane has been testifying, but we did hear about some of the exhibits that the jury did see. For example, photos of Jane and Diddy together, photos of them on the patio, photos of the red lights, and then even video from that night where Diddy is kind of talking about the Boston Celtics, and then it's over the song Lovely Day. And so the jury was able to see all of that. But Jane had testified under direct 30 minutes after taking that particular video where the Lovely Day song is playing, that this was 30 minutes after she took that video. That's when the physical assault occurred. And so Jane was saying, while she was still being cross-examined, that she and Diddy both had about 2 to 3 glasses of champagne. I think Diddy may have had one more glass more than her, and both took 2 shots of tequila. But Jane said that she had a feeling that another girl was on that family trip that Diddy had just returned from. And so the defense was kind of like, okay, well, you're saying that another girl was on this trip, but did you have any proof that another girl was on this trip? I think trying to insinuate that this reacts.
Okay, let's sip some tea on that. Doesn't Diddy have a 2-year-old baby? Right? So no matter what, through all of the drama, texting, and freak-offs, Diddy was carrying on in a intimate way to procreate with another woman, because Diddy has a 2-year-old, right? We know of the 2-year-old because when he was courting around with Young Miami, she came into the picture and she was pregnant and had a baby by Diddy. And Young Miami was like, so what? Whatever. I'm still rocking with the diddler, right? So more than likely, that's probably what was going on. He probably took her on a family trip. The the newest addition to his baby mamas of the 2-year-old.
Action out of Jane came out of nowhere. She had no proof that Diddy was with anyone besides his family. And so what ended up happening is that Jane got pretty upset. She threw glasses at Diddy. She threw candles at him. The wax got on him. And the defense was kind of trying to point out that there wasn't, like initially when this fight first broke out, that Diddy wasn't necessarily hitting her at first. And so they kind of talked a little bit more about this other woman and that this girl lived in Miami, that Diddy and Jane had fought previously about this particular woman. She was also someone who was unnamed. And then Jane was explaining that on that night on June 18th, going into June 19th of 2024, that it was kind of a ball of emotions that night. She had said that this was the first time that she had ever slammed Diddy's head into a counter. She said that this was the first time that she and Diddy even got into a physical altercation. And so Jane was calling him names such as pedophile and disgusting and a monster. And Diddy was kind of Diddy had called her crazy, but this was the defense was trying to point out that Diddy was calling her crazy after the candles and the glasses were thrown at him. And so then the defense is kind of like trying to piece by piece recount Jane's kind of events of the night, like how she ran into the bedroom and then the bathroom and then the closet and how she changed into a large dress and why was she still wearing heels and those types of things. And the defense throughout this was kind of pointing out that Diddy didn't put his hands on her up until it became a certain point. And so initially the defense was kind of like, okay, well, Diddy was just kind of following you behind. He was just following you to the bedroom and the bathroom, but just saying things along the lines of, are you not going to talk to me? But from Jane's perspective, she was saying that even throughout all of this, he was still kicking down her doors, because remember, under her direct testimony, the jury saw photos of her broken down doors, or the doors that were just either kicked through or hit through by Diddy. And Jane was telling Diddy to leave and that she hated him. And then again, the defense was going into, okay, well, why were you still wearing like a baggy dress and heels and not wearing activewear? You're someone that works out. Why wouldn't she change into just, I guess, activewear clothes as opposed to what she ended up wearing? And so it felt like the defense at that point was kind of trying to imply that Jane was the agitator in this situation. She was the one who threw the candles first. She was the one who threw the glass first. And that Diddy, around this time frame, because this, if you think about it also in context, it's June of 2024. This was weeks after the CNN video came out that showed the brutal assault video of Cassie and Diddy at the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. So it felt like at times, Jesse, that the defense was trying to imply that he was still feeling the stress from the CNN video being released, and maybe that is why he had that particular reaction. And so Jane was saying that Diddy did end up kicking her and putting her in a chokehold, and then a little bit later in her testimony, she kind of she explained that the chokehold was through his arm, and because the defense was like, well, we're seeing this video of 5 days later after this particular incident, and you don't have any finger marks around your neck. It doesn't seem like he strangled you doing this, but instead Jane was explaining that Diddy kind of grabbed her by the arm, put her up in a chokehold where she just was kind of just up in the air type of thing. And so the defense was...
Okay, let's sip this tea. Remember a minute ago, she just said, oh, Diddy, you have been the best lover I've ever had. You've been the best man to me ever in my life. You have been the best man to my child. Now, if this is 50 Cent baby mama, we ain't heard of nothing about 50 Cent putting his hand on his baby mama. From what we saw, she was very happy with 50 Cent. Baby very happy with 50 Cent. But Diddy's whooping your ass and he's the best man you ever had type shit. Y'all women will, completely disassemble any type of value or worth that you have for yourself for a fucking dollar. And we see why, people are pointing that aspect out about your ass. You can't be mad at that shit. We didn't hear 50 Cent say, or 50 Cent, you ever coming out about 50 Cent abusing you. Diddy was, though. Y'all are out here, wow.
pointing out that she had no discoloration on her neck, but then the defense was saying hours after, or after she was hiding for hours, I should say, that she kept on calling Diddy names, and that Diddy, when she came back from hiding for a few hours, because remember she said that she hid behind a wall for like 2 hours, that after she came back that she was still calling him names, but even after Diddy was calling her names that he didn't kick her during that time, and it was only while they were on the patio where Jane had punched Diddy in the back of the head, so then Diddy had punched her back and punched her in the eye and punched her in the forehead, and Diddy told her something along the lines of, "You're trying to take my kids away from me, you're trying to take me away from my kids." And so it seemed like, again, from the perspective, I think they were trying to frame this as, okay, well, maybe you're trying to look for something out of this because you just saw this hotel video that came out just weeks ago, and now you're instigating a fight that seemingly kind of came out of nowhere, and you're trying to possibly get something out of it. And so then they kind of got into a little bit more about it after the lunch break, and just that during this time frame, Jane had gotten a hold of the other woman that was allegedly on this family trip, and that this other woman was telling her mean things, Jane was telling her mean things, and then how Jane had to take a shower afterwards, but Diddy kept slapping her and those types of things. And then Diddy had told her, okay, we have never fought like this. Now that this lawsuit comes out, now you want to attack me. And so I feel like that's where the defense kind of really just was like, okay, it seems like you did have kind of a reason for doing this. And then they got into a fight just about how Jane was over in Vegas for that trip in January of 2024, and that even after the fight, Jane had to put on a hotel night outfit, and then Diddy took Jane's phone to text Anton. Then Diddy saw a message between Jane and Anton about that mutual friend, that being the unnamed rapper that she went on the Vegas trip with. Anton came over about 45 minutes later, according to Jane. At first, Jane and Anton were just kind of making small talk, but then the defense is kind of like, okay, well, when did you have time to put on makeup? You say that you put on makeup to cover up your bruises. And then it was like, okay, well, at any point you could have possibly just drove away and left. You could have left with your car and when you were trying to grab Anton. And so I feel like the defense was like, okay, there were just so many points that had happened during this night. But I think one thing that also stands out is that when Anton had arrived, Diddy and Jane went into a separate room in her home, and Diddy was still upset about this mutual friend that Jane had saw in Vegas, and Diddy told her, how could you go to another man's freak off? Go out there and F him, that being the entertainer that was still inside Jane's home. And then Jane told Diddy no, and then Diddy said, okay, well, is this coercion? And so what ended up happening, Jane took an ecstasy pill. She ended up giving this particular entertainer oral sex. Diddy had no interaction with Anton during this. They ended up cleaning up the glass before Anton even came over, and that was just kind of the gist. And I know that was kind of a lot, but I feel like the defense's entire point of just this particular piece of what had happened that night was just the reaction from the CNN video.
Well, the prosecution's banking it on being one of the more clear-cut cases of force being used to pressure her into a commercial sex act. And there seems to be the defense saying there's a lot more context, and maybe, and I think it was really interesting when you said, did she have a motivation to instigate this for personal benefit after the tape came out of him appearing to beat up Cassie Ventura? I think that's a really interesting point. But look, the defense was very keen in trying to say today, and during the course of their cross-examination for the last day or so, 2 days or so, that she consented to this. She consented to the hotel nights, that she had all this love for Sean Combs. What came out today? I mean, I know there was a text to the effect of, I feel as your lover, I wanted to please you, and I pushed through, and she wanted to cuddle with him. And then there was this all back and forth about, did she buy him a TV to watch certain movies together?
So Jane said, according to her, that she bought this portable TV so that way that, yes, she and Diddy could watch their movie nights. But she also explained that she and Diddy, or this was a way for her not to have sex with other men for these hotel nights. So instead of having to complete these hotel nights or do these hotel nights, instead she was like, okay, well, I bought him a portable TV screen that was, I guess, the size of just like kind of a computer monitor, so that way the two could watch their videos together instead of her having to actually do the sexual acts with other men. But even as far as just the text messages go too, the defense was showing, or showing the jury, I should say, just different text exhibits. For example, on December 20th of 2023, and this is around the time frame that Diddy had made this note saying that he didn't know how she felt about her wanting to do these hotel nights, where Jane is saying, you only reached out to me because you're waiting for someone else to come over. Diddy said, well, can you please take quiet time to read everything that I said? Thank you. I love you. And Jane was saying that there were moments of intense back and forth during this time period. She said this was a really emotional time frame for us. I really hit my wall here. Come to find out, another woman had the same experience with him, and that being Cassie, when she had just initially reached
New tea. Juror kicked off of the Diddy case. Let's see.
All right, welcome back, everybody.
About.
So we have with us Law and Crime's in-court reporter, Elizabeth Milner, who has been there every day of this currently 6-week trial, the Sean Diddy Combs federal court. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's great to see you. We have so many questions coming in. Aside from the fact that Marion DN, who says, meanwhile in London, not me delaying the family dinner to see Elizabeth come on. So you have a lot of people who are waiting to hear you. Let me ask you this. We got a question that came in from Allison Jones. Question for Elizabeth. Which team looks more worried, the defense or the prosecution?
Was that which team looks more ready? Is that what the question was? Worried. Oh, okay. That's a good question. Yeah, I think it kind of goes a little bit of both ways, because obviously we're kind of on the heels of what is about to be the defense case, right? And so I think they're kind of collecting everything, making sure all their ducks are in a row. But also with the government's case, I'm wondering, from the most part, from what we're understanding, it seems like the next big witness per se is going to be Brendan Paul. So as Brendan Paul's going to be one of the final witnesses, I'm wondering, do they have kind of something up their sleeves? Is there going to be kind of this big shocker moment with his testimony? Because outside of him testifying this week, we're really just hearing a lot from summary witnesses at this point. And so I'm wondering at this point also who might be a little bit more worried. But I think with the dismissal of the juror that happened this morning, it seemed like the defense might be a teensy, and I say that very, very lightly, might be a teensy bit worried. They seemed a little upset that the juror was dismissed.
Can we talk about this? Talk to us about what happened with the juror today that was dismissed. And also, apparently, there's an issue with another juror, too. What's going on?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us wanted to know what was going to be happening to juror number 6. Now, we learned on Friday that the judge was leaning towards dismissing the juror, but then Xavier Donaldson, he got up, he kind of made this really impassioned speech about why this particular juror should stay on. And a lot of it had to do with race and diversity on the jury. And if that juror were to be dismissed, what kind of message would that send to other potential jurors too? And so, you know, the judge weighed both decisions really, and took the weekend to kind of think things over. So we learned about what his ultimate ruling was going to be first thing. And so he really kind of took into account what the defense had, and they released a filing over the weekend that I think was about 15 pages long of all the reasons why this particular juror shouldn't be dismissed, also kind of throwing a little bit of light shade here and there to the prosecution. And so the judge took that all in, and he said this morning, you know, I understand its importance, but this amount of scrutiny isn't necessarily necessary. And so the judge was like, the inconsistencies from the juror raised a lot of these issues as far as why he was ultimately dismissed. So the judge said he went back, he looked at the record closely from voir dire, also to what the discussions were around the roving room, because remember, everybody, a lot of these inconsistencies really kind of had to do with this particular juror and whether or not he really revealed where he was truly living, whether or not it was in Jersey or in the Bronx. And so the judge went back, looked at everything, and said that he had serious concerns about the candor and how this particular juror, might have skewed his answers to stay on the jury. And so he said this might be threatening the integrity of the jury process. And so the defense did bring up in their arguments that replacing this juror with a white juror might send the wrong message. And they were even trying to argue that this should be grounds for a mistrial. And then the judge was kind of like, I don't think there are grounds for a mistrial here. What we're ultimately going to do is just dismiss the juror. Now, as far as the other juror that's possibly being talked about right now, we don't know the full extent of what that is. We believe that possibly it might have had to do with what happened on Friday when the judge released all of us out of the courtroom, closed the doors, locked the doors to really kind of discuss what we initially thought was the juror number 6 issue. But it turns out it might have to do with whatever happened to this other juror. So as far as I could tell, really only one juror was dismissed. And we kind of saw like a little shift in the change of the jury box where everyone, beginning I think is from the second row, kind of trickling into the first row, just moved down one seat. And so we did see the new juror seated and everything like that. And then we still see the alternates in the back row. But we're kind of waiting to see more information about what this possible other juror issue might be. And so hopefully we'll learn about that more at the end of the day.
Speaking of the jurors, we had a question that just came in from 1989. A question for Elizabeth. Do the jurors look like they've heard enough?
I mean, it's a lot of testimony that they've been hearing and listening to for weeks on end. I'm wondering, did they hear enough? Or are they kind of feeling like everything is feeling just a little bit repetitive? That question definitely goes through my mind a little bit, especially since we're doing a lot of summary charts, summary witnesses, where it's just a lot of charts and a lot of text messages, that type of thing. But they still have to be in it because we still have the defense's case to get through. So from what I've seen today, even with this juror now dismissed, that I have seen them still being attentive, still taking their notes. But I'm kind of wondering too, like how much information does this jury need? But from the government's case, they still need a little bit more before they can finally rest their case.
And look, Elizabeth, you're one of the rare people who actually gets to see these arguments unfold. You see the style of the attorneys. You see the reaction, which is why we have this question that comes in from Enlin DK. You were talking about Xavier Donaldson, right? How did you feel, Elizabeth, about Donaldson's arguments?
That's kind of a hard question for me to ask. You really threw me in there, Jesse. I understood where he was going with, right? Like I understood the impassion that he has, especially when it comes to race relations and the fact that it really has to do with just this diverse of a jury that we're really seeing. And, this being like one of the first federal trials that I'm covering. I'm not seeing kind of the same like things that maybe Xavier Donaldson is seeing, right? Like he has been practicing law, and I hate to put it this way, since I was like a little
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.